Hi, my name is Rishi Jalan. I'm the CEO founder of the Big Red Group. I'm part of the DLC's CSR Committee Delhi chapter, and today I'm here to talk about leadership and empathy. Before we really deep dive into leadership, there are two main things that we have to understand. There are two kinds of people in today's business world. One are managers, and the other one are leaders. And let me break it down for you so that you understand it in a better fashion. When you think about establishing a company, or when you think about creating an agenda, the managers are thinking about how do we really solve a problem, or how do we create some sort of a way to bring people about. The leaders are actually thinking about aligning people. When you think about execution, managers are thinking about staffing problems. They're thinking about problem solving. The leaders are actually thinking about motivating and inspiring. When you talk about outcomes, managers love control. They're thinking about how do we control, how do we bring order in this chaotic scenario. Leaders are always thinking about change in a good way, change in a way that you move forward. So these are the two essential elements that sort of separate leaders and managers. Don't get me wrong, we all need good managers in today's companies. What do you have when you have great leaders but no managers? You won't be able to get anything done. But at the same time, you need people to not just do the work that you've told them to do, but you need to inspire them. And you need to be really motivating for them to bring about this change. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is to really differentiate between who a manager is and who a leader is. Now, of course, leadership in whatever I've talked about so far seems amazing. Everyone today wants to be a leader. Now, how do we do that? There are three main things today when it comes to being a good leader. And all of these three qualities have something or the other that a leader has to have. The first one, and by the way, I didn't really develop these concepts. These concepts were developed 2,300 years ago by Aristotle. The first one is called logos, where the English word logic comes from, which really means clarity of thought. The first thing a leader needs to have is the clarity of thought. What do we mean by that? Let me give you an example. When you go to a doctor, probably not such a good doctor, and you tell him, hey, I have a headache. He's going to tell you, listen, take an aspirin, and it's all going to be fine tomorrow. That's probably not the doctor you want to go back again. The second kind of a doctor, who's probably a leader and also a good doctor, would actually ask you imploring questions. He will say, listen, when did you get your eyes checked the last time? How much caffeine have you been drinking? How many hours of sleep have you been having? Every good leader really looks at a complex problem, really implores and really tries to get to the bottom of a situation, which we call the root cause analysis, and then only comes up with a solution. So any good leader needs to have a clarity of thought and a very cool ability to look at a complex problem and come with a simple solution. The second one, which of course today a lot of you guys are thinking about, is pathos, which is what the English word empathy comes from. Now, we're going to come back to pathos and empathy a lot more, but empathy and pathos is this huge bucket today. It talks about your emotional quotient. It talks about relative leadership. It talks about how you treat people. It talks about all the other things which has to do anything which carries a relationship with it. And that's what it really is. If I have to simplify and sort of dumb it down for you, it really means building relationships with people. And that's what pathos is all about. The third big element of leadership is ethos, where the English word ethics come from. And again, in a very simpler term, what it really means is having admirable qualities that people aspire for. Let me repeat it for you. It actually means having admirable qualities that people aspire for. Now, when you go to the best business schools, you go to Harvard, you go to Stanford, you go to the top business schools around the world, what do people really want to know about? What do the 30-year-olds or even the top executive program professionals want to know about? They are all focused on logos. They want to be the best marketeers. They want to have the best organizations. They want to be the best finance professional they can ever be. But a lot of less stress is given on the other two elements of leadership, which actually consist of pathos and ethos. And that is what today's leaders need to focus on. Now, let me give you a couple of more examples which will bring the element of pathos a lot closer to you. There's a very famous poet, one of my favorites at least, called Maya Angelou. And she said this beautiful thing, that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, as a leader, of course, you have to be competitive, but you can't always be bragging about you. You can't really be putting people down, because forget about what that will make people think of you, but just imagine what that will make them think about themselves. So empathy or pathos really comes down to building relationships, inspiring people, and you have to do it with care and sensitivity. Moving back, there is this tree of life today that people talk about. Now, in this tree of life, there is the above the surface tree of life, and then there is below the surface tree of life. In above the surface, most of us, all around the world, what are some of the things we are thinking about today? What are my strengths? What are my goals? What am I trying to achieve here? Most of us, till a dying breath, keep thinking about these 2 or 3 points and try to make a place in the world, which a lot of managers do really, really well. The other part, which is the below the surface questions and sort of propositions, is something we forget about. Now, these are 2 or 3 things which are really important for a leader to implore once again and to think about. The first one would be, what are the drivers? What does really drive me? What does really excite me? The second one would be, what are my values? What do I really value from the bottom of my heart? What are the true values that I believe in? And the third thing would actually be on, why am I here? What is the deepest desire that really motivates me, that fuels my energy every morning that I get up? Once again, I know these are tough questions to answer. It's not really easy, and you don't have to really go to the mountains to, really get answers to these questions. But these are simple but imploring questions that we all need to look at if we want to become a good leader. Because once you go to the root cause and you go below the surface questions, that's when the real answers will come to you, and you will be able to inspire people just above the surface. Now, after all of this, of course, we have talked about leadership, we've talked about passion, we've talked about pathos and ethos. Let me also talk about a word that is flying around today, courage. Now, of course, we all know that today's leaders have to be courageous. Every leader should be courageous. But what does courage really mean? Courage, for most of us, we seem to think, is the absence of fear, right? Let me give you a very personal anecdote here. My father was in the army, and I asked him a couple of questions on, hey, what happened when you fought this war or the other war? And he would actually tell me that, oh my God, we were really scared. We were inside the enemy territory. The enemy got to know about it, and we were out there fighting. And of course, I was wanting to hear from my father that no, I thought he would be the Clint Eastwood, and thought that, oh my God, he'd say, son, I was not scared. But he said completely the opposite thing, which was, listen, I was scared, but we still had a job to do, and we got it done. And that really struck to me. What really is courage? And it's not having the absence of fear, but having perseverance in the face of fear. And again, I know it sounds really abstract, but it's really not. It's really simple. We all have problems. We all will have big problems in our organizations, in our life. But as a leader, what you truly need to Internalize is that problems will keep happening, but you have to keep moving on, keep going on, and that's sort of what makes the difference. Of course, we've talked about leadership, and I've talked about the above the surface and below the surface, right? Now, how do you really go below the surface is really up to all of you, but I will leave you with a few wise lines from the Upanishads. Of course, I'm an Indian, so I had to bring it up, but of course, we'll go back even further than Aristotle, some 3,000 years back, and the beauty is, I don't know who wrote these lines, some man or woman at that time, but it really gets you again to implore deep down inside. It goes something like this. You are what your deepest desire is. As your desire is, so is your intention. As your intention is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. And as your deed is, so is your destiny. And I'm going to end with that. Thank you. It was a pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you for listening to me. And I hope we are all able to become better, empathetic leaders in the future. Thank you.